And this is where you're going to kind of have to just take that frustration and that, you know, we're going to do a how to make screen print transfers video. Ryonet made a post, big shout out to the Ryonet fam over there, that people wanted to see tutorial videos on how to do some things and to shoot some tutorials and send them over. They'd put them on the website and kind of feature them out. We figured what a great time. This week we happen to have some screen print transfers, and one of the things y'all wanted to see about is how to make screen print transfers. So today we're going to do some hats for Universal Green, local hip-hop, live hip-hop band from Jacksonville, Florida. Definitely check them out. We'll link them right over somewhere like here. Yeah, you see that right there? Yeah. But we're going to walk you through step-by-step kind of how to do this. Now, we already had the artwork kind of set up. Everything was already looking pretty good. This one we did do some minor adjustments and kind of rebuilt the logo to kind of make it look a little bit more cohesive and fit on the hat a little bit. You see up here we've got some sizing for 3 inches tall by 4.5 inches wide. So that's the size, and we got 2 different hat designs. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna screen print transfer these, and we've got them laid out on our registration and everything's ready to go so we can burn it into a screen. But before we do that, we'll take these vectors here. We'll go ahead and save a new file. We'll save it as UG Trucker Hat rasterized registration template. Come in here and you'll notice that everything's backwards. That's another step, but we'll come into this file and it'll originally look something like this. You know, same exact thing saved as a copy. And then we'll come in here and we'll go to everything in here, all of our designs, and with a quick transform, we can go ahead and reflect these things. And this is going to reflect them back to the way they were. That's how they looked coming in. So we'd go and do the same thing. We'd preview it, and we'd go ahead and we'd actually flip them, you know, and it gives us that backwards transfer. And that's going to allow us to print the transfer, or when we lay it back to the hat and actually transfer it to it, it's going to allow the design to read straight. You got to remember that this is getting mirrored back onto something. So if you don't do this reversal, you'll have backwards designs on your hat. So once we have our design set up there and everything's flipped and we're reversed and everything else, we just go in to make this print ready. Right at that final step, we'd go ahead and rasterize this out. Now I've already done it, so it's already rasterized, ready to go. And we printed it to a transparency that looks a little something like this. Burned it into a 155 mesh screen, and now we're going to lay down some black ink and we're going to show y'all how to do some ink transfers. Hey, we're back. So to make any killer screen print transfer, one of the first things you're going to need is you're going to need some transfer paper. Now you'll see people online who say you can do it on some parchment paper, you know, cookie sheets, stuff like that, and we've tried it. You can. It will work. But what I would recommend is hitting up our friends over at Ryonet and getting yourself the hookup. Alright, so we've got 2 different things that we ordered from them this go. We've used them before. Killer products. We really love it. So we figured if we're making a video for Ryonet, we might as well show off some of Ryonet's cool stuff. So today, we got some more transfer adhesion powder from Ryonet. This is what you're going to use to put on your ink before you cure it in order to leave a glue that's going to help attach that image back to the actual hat and keep it there for a long time. So we got some adhesion powder and some Ryonet transfer paper. Hashtag power in the print. So now that we have this, Alan's going to show you all the screen, and we're going to get ready to print this bad boy up. We'll see you in just a minute. You just have it zoom in a white screen in my face and then it pops out. You know what I'm saying? It's gonna be awesome.
And we're gonna be right back.
Protest, yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying, dude. You got something that you can. See you in just a minute.
Alright guys, so we got our image burned into the screen. We got it in a 155 since we're doing it on white. But, like we showed you earlier, it is going to be backwards, so you have to print it backwards so that way when you lay it onto the transfer sheet, it's facing the right way. So when you look at it, you're like, oh man, that looks weird, but you just got to remember that it is backwards. So today we'll bust out our Ryonet tape this thing up, and we'll go to the next step.
See you in just a minute.
And we're back. So before you print on any of this Ryonet paper or any parchment paper of any sort that you're about to do a transfer on, you have to pre-treat your paper. So you're pre-shrinking it because it's going to have a little bit of a shrink to it. So you don't want to print on it and then run it through and then it shrinks and then your image is completely just like distorted and whatnot. So you want to run these through the dryer just like you would a shirt, but you're basically pre-shrinking it, pre-treating it, so that way when we print on it, it's going to be in the actual form of the image when we print it. So we're just going to run these bad boys through here real quick. Alright, so we got our paper come out. Paper feels nice, and you can feel the difference between one that's ran through and one that has not. This one's real smooth and real just crisp feeling, whereas when you run it through the dryer, it's got more of a dry feelness to it. So now these are ready to go. We'll print on these. Chris is getting some ink ready for the screen. We showed you guys the screen already, so we're going to get ready to put the ink on the screen, print these bad boys on here, and then we'll show you the next step after that.
We're putting some ink on the screen. Today we're using a black, low temperature cure, international coatings, low build black. It's messy as hell. You can see that. But today we're going to use this low cure black because it just allows us to get the ink. We're going to try to hit these. We're going to hit these things twice. So you know, it's black ink. When you're doing a t-shirt, a lot of times you can get away with just one pass of that black ink. Problem is when you're doing transfers is you're looking for a thick buildup of ink. So you do want it to kind of have some raised texture to it as it's coming onto the transfer paper. And we're gonna, you know, some things are gonna adjust as far as like the angle of the squeegee, and we'll talk about that as we get there. But realistically, we just want to make sure that we have a nice thick ink deposit, so when we go to press this thing back on the hat and it presses some of that ink into the fabric of the hat, it's not going to create like distortion in the lines, or it's going to look thin in some spots. So we want to make sure we have a really thick, kind of laid down black color, and a lot of people will do that using a 110 mesh screen. So as long as you shrink your paper, as long as you get your flash times down, you know, this can work really easily, and this is what we've found just kind of turns out the best results for us. So we're going to get a squeegee together. We're going to use a typical like 70 durometer squeegee today, just so we can get a good amount of ink pushed through this thing. We're going to flood it out. We're going to start pushing on some Ryonet paper. Quick flash. We'll hit it again, and then we'll move on to the next step of this thing, which is going to be coating this thing in adhesion powder. So let's check this out, and Alan will be fast forwarding into that.
Alright guys, so we're about to do the lay the paper down, the Ryonet paper. We typically use like pallet glue when we're laying down our shirts, but pallet glue doesn't necessarily hold the transfer paper too well. So what we're going to do today is use some 3M spray tack. We found that it helps hold the paper down, because when we first started doing it, we noticed that if we just used the pallet glue, the paper would come up with the screen, so it really didn't hold down too well. So we use the spray adhesive. So we're going to put this down, put some papers down, and kind of go from there.
Moment of truth, y'all. So we got this nice here, ergonomic, beautiful squeegee from our friends over at Ryonet. And we're going to go ahead and put some ink to this beautiful Ryonet transfer paper. So let's see how this thing works, alright? Get this stuff nice and warm and gooey.
Warm and gooey?
All the gooey. Make sure we get a nice deep flood here. And then as we're pressing down, this is paper. This is not a t-shirt. So when you're printing a t-shirt, like the ink is getting pressed into the actual fabric of the shirt. Whereas this paper, if you press too hard, what you're going to end up getting is you're going to get blown out lines and distorted edges. So you want to get it the right angle and the right pressure to where it clears the screen, but you're not having to just force this thing down like crazy to like matted down. It's gonna get pressed with a heat press. It's gonna look nice, I promise. It's gonna look real clean, so you don't have to do all that. Don't work harder than you have to. Find a nice, comfortable kind of angle where we see that we're moving ink across the screen. We're pretty comfortable. We're gonna get right here. We're gonna go one pass. We're gonna get a little bit of release. We're gonna come back. We're gonna do 2 passes. We're gonna get a little bit of release. I already see one problem. So, perfect example of an issue here. I was putting a great amount of pressure down here, up here at the top. And as it got lower, my pressure stayed heavier, and it created some blowout on the lines. You're gonna have to figure this stuff out, guys. So it's gonna definitely be a learning curve every once in a while of what works, what doesn't, what's the right angle, what can I do to fix this. So we're gonna push this out, get our screen cleaned again, and we're gonna go for the next one.
Come up with it. Look, see those 3 little lines there?
Yeah.
Blown. I gotta lower the screen down.
As you saw, we were having kind of some issues clearing that final one on the side. What we ended up finding out is just the off contact of the screen was just set way too high. We had it raised up for like some thicker hoodies we did in the last week and some t-shirts, and it just, when you're dealing with paper, like I said, you're gonna have to figure out where that comfortable balance is, like what the off contact may be, what the squeegee pressure is, you know, what your flash time is. You know, keep in mind that these things get very hot very quick, so if you're using a low cure ink, you may only need to flash these things for 4 or 5 seconds. You know, you want it to come out tacky but not picking up on your finger, you know, and if you have to adjust a little bit, you'll find out what works for you. But we were able to lower it down. I think we've got the problems fixed, so let's go ahead and try and print another one of these transfers and see if we can't get every single image on here to turn out the way we want it to. So here we go. I'm going to take this fine Ryonet squeegee yet again. Good angle, decent amount of pressure. Go all the way through. Got it one more time. You're gonna have a little bit of stick because, you know, the palette's got spray tack and it's gonna stick to the back of the screen. But see, now we've got clean lines. They're all sharp. That part of that end's not missing. Like, this line's a little bit blown out here, but if you look, it's got some ink build up, and we don't need those registration marks, so they're not bothering us right now. But even down to this really fine hats, 3 inches tall by 4.5 inches wide. Like, maybe, you know, maybe we didn't get such a great flood, but, you know, we're not using this. The point is, it looks good. You can read it, and the major design portion of this looks great. So we're gonna flash it. We're gonna hit some more. We're gonna hit them again, and then we're gonna get ready to put some adhesion powder on them, and then we're gonna put them on some hats that you can wear. Some Universal Green hats that you can buy from Universal Green. Right over here's their link to go check them out. Contact them. Get one of these hats. They're going to be great. Fantastic. We flashed this thing 5 seconds. We're using a low cure ink. You know, once it comes out of the flash dryer, we pretty quickly just want to kind of touch it. Now that's a really heavy ink deposit there, so that might be why that ink's kind of coming up. But here in these thinner lines, we're still getting a little bit. It's not perfect. So what we want to do is we're going to want to adjust the time. This next one will go 7 seconds. Let's see what it pulls off. We're still pulling up a little bit of ink here. You can see on my finger. It's not a bunch, but it's there. So we're going to bump up again. You're just going to have to test these things out. Figure out where, you know, your equipment gets done what you need it to get done. And don't be worried about it. We can go back and we can reflash these, and we can get them where we need them before we put that second coat on. So these aren't ruined. They're not done forever. But make sure you pick a spot like the registration marks or your tiny little print up here to touch and check, because you don't want to be messing up your design. And we're still having some issues here. So I think we're going to try bumping it up, you know, another 2 seconds again. For now, with the heat of our palettes, this paper, right around 12 seconds, we're good. Now, this is a small production run. We're not doing a bunch of these things, so the palettes aren't going to heat up and heat up and heat up. But if you were doing 100 or 200 of these things, you really got to start to watch your flash. As your palettes heat up, these are going to flash quicker. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to completely cure the first underbase of ink and then have to lay down ink on top of it, because what you're going to find out is as things get washed or they get messed with, like some of it starts to peel out because they're not fused together. You need the inks to be not completely dry, so when they lay over top of each other, there's a fusing that happens here, and we're left with one fused together layer of ink just printed twice, rather than, you know, a layer and then you stick something else on top of it, and then eventually something gets in the middle, and then eventually you've got this happening. We don't want that happen. 12 seconds, like I said, adjust these things. Go a second or two at a time. You run your papers back through, test it. You want it to come out where you can touch this thing and it feels a little tacky, but I ain't got no ink on my finger. That's the big thing we're going for here. Touch it. It needs to feel tacky, but no ink on your finger. Once you have that, go back through and hit a second coat.
After you're done hitting your second coat and you're ready to pull these things off, you do not immediately throw it into the dryer. Before you put it through your dryer, you want to go back and use that Ryonet adhesion powder that we showed you earlier. So what we done is we got ourselves a nice little bin here that fits our paper in, and we have ourselves a little adhesion powder bucket per se. So we got our powder here, and what we're going to do, as soon as that paper comes off, we're going to throw it in here, and you're just going to sprinkle some powder all over it, kind of shake the paper around, you know, get you enough powder to cover the whole thing. And once the powder has covered the entire image, then you can take it and throw it through the dryer. Now remember, you don't flash it a second time. You want that ink to be nice and wet so that adhesion powder has something to grab a hold of. So do not flash it a second time, just the one time between ink passes. So don't flash it the second time, you pull your paper off. Now remember, with this adhesion powder, if there's any big lumps or anything like that, you're gonna end up with a big glue deposit, because what this powder does is it turns into a liquid glue when it's heated up. So you want to try to just, you know, knock off any kind of heavy deposits of that powder you can real quick. So you got a nice smooth layer of powder on there, and then what we're gonna do, we're gonna run it through the dryer. As it comes out of the dryer, it's no longer a powder anymore. We now have, you can see it's a lot brighter black now. Every single bit of this is real sticky from that powder. That powder has now turned into a glue, and we're gonna let this kind of sit here for a few minutes, let it cool down, and then we'll take it to the next step.
When these things come out and you've got your glue on them and everything else, once they've cooled down, this is kind of your test to see if what you have done is working the way you want to do it. So realistically, these are dried on here now. We should be able, with our finger and fingernail, to just kind of start to peel back, and it should kind of peel like a sticker. So what we want to do is go in and we'll take one of these registration marks and we'll kind of start trying to get at the edge of it. So as you can see, I don't have very great fingernails, but we're starting to get this thing. It's cured on here, it's peeling off, and if we pull it off, it's gonna shrivel up because it's got no real like weight to it or any structure, but it came off, it's dried, it's not transferring to my hands, it's not wet ink, it's just a dry piece of ink. So these get the stamp of approval. Now it's time to put them on some hats. Let's go. We are going to be transferring these to just a standard trucker mesh cap. We got two colors. We got a real bright electric lime green here, and then we got a real nice kind of like softer graphite, darker gray. So I think both of these will look great with that black ink. We picked these up on Buck Wholesale. You don't have to have a resale license. You don't have to have a tax certificate to buy from them. And one of the great things they offer is a year return. So if you buy some hats and a customer doesn't pick them up within a year, you want to ship them back, you know, as long as you return them within the year, they'll refund you for the hats. So pretty cool thing that Buck Wholesale does. But these ones are already spoken for, and they're going to be universal greened. Alright, so let's go universal green these bitches. Green these bitches. Green these bitches. We just have a cheap little heat press. You can buy this thing online on Amazon at $250, $300. It came with several attachments for hats and, you know, pressing t-shirts, which we'll get into later. How to make your buttery, smooth fashion print. We do that with this guy. So But for today, we're working on hats. So we're just going to get the hat attachment on here. We're going to get this thing dialed in around 360. There's going to be some experimenting, guys. You're going to have to figure it out. You're going to have to try it. You're going to have to ruin a couple hats. Buy a few extra. They're cheap. Try and figure out what your problems are, what that perfect temperature and what that perfect pressing is for you. But if you look, a lot of these glues and a lot of these inks will tell you around 360, sometimes maybe people go up to 380, depending upon how good your press is and how good the actual thermostat in it is, how accurate. You're going to have to kind of adjust. So, you know, we've got our hat palette put on here now. So we're just waiting for this bad boy to finish cooling off because we pressed out some super hot 1904 music hall shirts today. But as soon as we're done with that, we're going to throw this little guy on. And it's going to be time to make some hats. So, we'll check that out in just a minute.
You love your transitions.
Now I just feel like it's too funny not to. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, what do I have in my hand that I can make Cody make a weird transition with? You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, one of these. We'll see y'all soon. Yeah.
What?
You know? I think we can make that work, you know what I'm saying? And then it's like,
You might as well have just done the
and we're back, you know what I'm saying? Like, what do you know?
on your head.
What's up, y'all? We're back. So, that was actually pretty good. So now we're gonna get ready to press these things onto here. So let me flip this back around. American Aquarium. We're gonna press these Universal Green logos onto these hats. We've got everything ready to go. All we need is a couple of things. We need our heat press heated up to about 360 degrees. Ours kind of hovers between 359, 361. It stays right in that area. We're going for 8 seconds to start. Okay, so we want to make sure that we've got a decent amount of pressure. So we're going to kind of play around with this thing, and that feels pretty good. Like we're pressing down some good pressure. We're going to get ready to put a hat on. We're going to need this heat-resistant tape here that we're going to use. This stuff just kind of doesn't melt, but it'll hold the design onto the hat where we want it as we swing this thing on and off and press some hats. You're going to take your hat just as it came out of the thing. It's ready to go. Doesn't need much else done to it here other than a real quick pre-treat. We're going to take this hat, we're going to line it up where we think's pretty good in center. We're going to bring this thing around. When you're pressing shirts and you're trying to create that fine effect, that super premium finish vinyl feeling print with ink, you're going to want to use that Teflon sheet because if you apply direct heat from one of these plates to your ink, you're going to have problems. In today's case, we're using the Ryonet paper. So the Ryonet paper is going to actually act as our shield from the direct heat of this being pressed to the ink while we're pressing it into the hat. So all we're going to do here now that we've got our hat prepped is we're just going to take this thing. We're going to try to line it up on here about the best we think we can. We're going to take that diamond in the center. We're going to try and get it somewhere close in there to... Alright, so we're going to cut a couple little pieces of our heat transfer tape here. Then we're just going to plop a little piece of tape down. We're going to hold it on there, alright? Once we got this thing kind of where we want it, we've got it positioned, we feel like it's pretty good. You want to check and make sure that, you know, all parts of your design are actually underneath the press where the ink's going to be getting the pressure. So, and then all we're going to do is we're just going to clamp this guy down with full pressure. We're going to hit this little button, and we're going to let that thing go for 8 seconds. Release our pressure. Looks horrible. Here is a mistake. Another little issue we're having. Maybe this is we're not getting enough pressure. Maybe it's not enough heat. Maybe it's, you know, a combination of all the things. But what we're going to have to do is we're just going to have to try again. So you got to realize that stuff like this may not turn out perfect the first time. You know, sometimes it does, and you just miraculously work through it. But, you know, we're going to make a couple adjustments. I think putting down a little more pressure on this thing might help. Making sure this thing's centered a little, you know, underneath this plate a little better. And then we'll try a second one and we'll see what we can pull off. So, check back with y'all in just a second. Alright, so, as I said, and by the way, welcome to the new studio. Feels good in here, right? Big ups to Cody. We got it looking nice. This is where we'll be shooting all sorts of little talking head video content. But back to the problem at hand. We were having issues with this 155 mesh on these screen print transfers. Okay? It wasn't sticking to the hat. We ruined a bunch of hats trying to figure it out. we've done these before and we're still having little issues along the way, okay? And this is where you're gonna kind of have to just take that frustration and that, you know, we walked away for a night and I thought about it. And so we came back, we made some adjustments to the artwork, we kind of thickened up some of the lines, and then instead of using a 155 mesh screen, we decided to bump it down to a 110. And we burned it into something that was going to give us a little bit of a thicker, heavier, you know, kind of coat of ink on that screen print transfer. So when we put it to the hat, there was a little bit more to actually stick and press. We also adjusted the size down a little bit because our hat palette just isn't the biggest, and I think we were having some issues with trying to make the design look, you know, maybe too big for what we could handle. You know, we made some adjustments and then printed some new transfers, and then we got Cody. He pressed some hats out for us, and y'all go ahead and check out what those looked like, and we'll circle back here one more time at the end and take a look at the finished product. But here's Cody right now.
Take our hat, put it onto the press, make sure it's nice and snug, and we want to pre-treat it. So we're at 380 now for 8 seconds. I'm going to let this go, and that'll heat up the fabric a little bit, get it a little bit more ready to take the ink that we're going to be pressing onto it. Place it onto here, and we have our heat-resistant tape. And again, like I said, we're at 380. We're using a very heavy pressure. These hats are very like foamy, so they're really a lot of cushion and thickness to them. So I want to use a very heavy press on it, a little bit more than what like you kind of almost feel comfortable with. Like if it takes a little bit to get it down, it's kind of what you're looking for, at least for these hat presses. And then now when I got that up, I'm just going to slowly peel this back. You don't just want to rip it off, but you do slowly peel it back, which I guess I can do over here. We'll just slowly peel this back, not doing it too quick. And there we go, and that's it. So I'm going to go and finish up the rest of these, and we're good to go.
Alright guys, so welcome back. So like I said, as y'all saw, they turned out great. I think Cody did a killer job, you know, and these right here, I don't think you can argue. I mean, they look great. You know, I don't know if you can really see that right there, but God, these things came out looking good. You know, so as always, make sure to like, subscribe, share to all the channel. Make sure that you share it with your friends. Send some love out to everybody. I know that everybody's sitting at home kind of feeling a little down in the dumps right now, but, you know, hopefully we can bring a smile to y'all's face. Big shout out to the Ryonet homies for setting up this whole, you know, make some tutorial videos, send them over. They are spreading the knowledge of screen printing in a way that we find truly inspiring, and everything that Ryan and company's doing over there is just, it's great, man. We have nothing but love for y'all. So, until the next time, thank y'all very much. This is how to make screen print transfers. Y'all have a nice day. Bye.